Welcome to episode number 4 of React.js tutorial series, React Class Components. Before React 16.8, class components were the only way to track state and lifecycle on a React component. Function components were considered stateless. With the addition of hooks, function components are now almost equivalent to class components. The differences are so minor that you will probably never need to use a class component in React. Even though function components are preferred, there are no current plans on removing class components from React. This section will give you an overview of how to use class components in React. Feel free to skip this section and use function components instead. React components. Components are independent and reusable bits of code. They serve the same purpose as JavaScript functions but work in isolation and return HTML via a render function. Components come in two types: class components and function components. In this chapter, you will learn about class components. Create a class component. When creating a React component, the component's name must start with an uppercase letter. The component has to include the extends react.component statement. This statement creates an inheritance to react.component and gives your component access to react.component's functions. The component also requires a render method. This method returns HTML. Example: create a class component called car. Class car extends react.component curly bracket starts render method return h2 element. Hi, I am a new car. I am a car. Okay. Now your React application has a component called car which returns a h2 element. To use this component in your application, use similar syntax as normal HTML less than car / greater than. Example: display the car component in the root element. Const root equals to react dom dot create root of element dot get element by id root dot render car. Component constructor. If there is a constructor function in your component, this function will be called when your component gets initiated. The constructor function is where you initiate the component's properties. In React, component properties should be kept in an object called state. You will learn more about state later in this tutorial. The constructor function is also where you honor the inheritance of the parent component by including the super statement, which executes the parent component's constructor function, and your component has access to all the functions of the parent component react.component. Example: create a constructor function in the car component and add a color property. Class car extends react.component. Constructor method super method this.state equals to color red. Render method return h2 I am a new car closing tag h2. Use the color property in the render function. Example: class car extends React.component constructor curly bracket starts super method this dot state color equals to red render return h2 ima this dot state dot color space car h2 element closes props. Another way of handling component properties is by using props. Props are like function arguments and you send them into the component as attributes. You will learn more about props in the next chapter. Example: use an attribute to pass a color to the car component and use it in the render function. Class car extends React.component render method return h2 ima this.props.color car h2 const root react.dom dot create root document get element by id root dot render less than car color equals to red. Okay, fine. Props in the constructor. If your component has a constructor function, the props should always be passed to the constructor and also to the React.component via the super method. Example: class car extends React.component constructor props super props render method return h2 ima this dot props dot model h2 const root equals to react dom dot create root document dot get element by id of root dot render less than car model equals to Mustang. Components in components. We can refer to components inside other components. Example: use the car component inside the garage component. Class car extends React.component. Render method return h2 ima car h2 closed. Class garage extends React.component এখানে আছে render মেথডের মধ্যে আছে return parenthesis শুরু div h1 who lives in my garage h1 তারপর আছে car তারপর হচ্ছে div এখানে কার বলতে আসলে যে এটাকেই বোঝানো হয়েছে so const root equals to react dom dot create root document dot full element get element by id root dot render garage. Components in files. React is all about reusing code and it can be smart to insert some of your components in separate files. To do that, create a new file with a .js file extension and put the code inside it. Note that the file must start by importing React as before and it has to end with the statement export default car semicolon. This is the new file, we named it car.js. Import React from React. Class car extends React.component render method return h2 hi I am a car h2 closed. Export default car. To be able to use the car component, you have to import the file in your application. Example: now we import the car.js JS file in the application, and we can use the car component as if it was created here. Import React from React, import React DOM from React DOM / client, import car from car.js. Const root equals to React DOM dot create root document dot get element by id root dot render car. React class component state. React class components have a built-in state object. You might have noticed that we used state earlier in the component constructor section. The state object is where you store property values that belongs to the component. When the state object changes, the component re-renders. Creating the state object. The state object is initialized in the constructor. Example, specify the state object in the constructor method. Class car extends react.component react props super props this.state equals to brand Ford. Render method return div h1 my car h1 div. Okay. The state object can contain as many properties as you like. Example, specify all the properties your component need. Class car extends react.component constructor props super props this.state equals to an object having 4 properties brand model color year and initiated with Ford Mustang Red and 1964 respectively. Okay. Render method return div h1 my car h1 div. Okay. Using the state object. Refer to the state object anywhere in the component by using the state this.state.property name syntax. Example, refer to the state object in the render method. Class car extends react.component constructor props super props this.state equals to an object with 4 properties brand model color and year render return div h1 my this.state.brand p it's a this.state.color this.state.model from this.state.year p closed div closed. Changing the state object. To change a value in the state object, use the this.setState method. When a value in the state object changes, the component will re-render, meaning that the output will change according to the new values. Example, add a button with an on-click event that will change the color property. Class color extends react.component constructor props super props this.state equals to an object brand model color year Ford Mustang Red 1964. Change color change color equals to yes arrow function this dot set state of color dot blue fine render মেথডের মাধ্যমে রিটার্ন করতেছে এই অ্যাডা আর কি div h1 my this dot state dot brand h1 p it is a this dot state dot color this dot state dot model from this dot state dot year p button, type button on click this dot change color, fine, change color button div. Always use the setState method to change the state object. It will ensure that the component knows it's been updated and calls the render method and all the other lifecycle methods. Lifecycle of components. Each component in React has a lifecycle which you can monitor and manipulate during its three main phases. The three main phases are mounting, updating, and unmounting. Mounting. Mounting means putting elements into the DOM. React has four built-in methods that gets called in this order when mounting a component. One, constructor to get derived state from props method. तीन, render method. चार, component did mount method. The render method is required and will always be called. The others are optional and will be called if you define them. Constructor. The constructor method is called before anything else when the component is initiated, and it is the natural place to set up the initial state and other initial values. The constructor method is called with the props as arguments, and you should always start by calling the super of props before anything else. This will initiate the parent's constructor method and allows the component to inherit methods from its parent React.component. Example: the constructor method is called by React every time you make a component. Class header extends React.component. Constructor props, super of props, this.stat equals to favorite color red. Render method return h1. My favorite color is this dot stat dot favorite color. Const root equals to react dom dot create root document get element by id root dot render of header. Get derived state from props. The get derived state from props method is called right before rendering the elements in the DOM. This is the natural place to set the state object based on the initial props. It takes state as an argument and returns an object with changes to the state. The example below starts with the favorite color being red, but the get derived state from props method updates the favorite color based on the favcall attribute. The get derived state from props method is called right before the render method. Okay. Class header extends React.component. Constructor props, super props, this dot state equals to favorite color red. Static get derived state from props state return favorite color colon props dot favcall. Render method return h1. My favorite color is this dot state dot favorite color h1 closed. Okay. Const root equals to react dom dot create root of document dot get element by id root dot render header favcall yellow. Okay. Render. The render method is required and is the method that actually outputs HTML to the DOM. Example: a simple component with a simple render method. Class header extends React.component render method return h1. This is the content of the header component h1 closed. Okay. Const root equals to React DOM dot create root document dot get element by id of root dot render header component did mount. The component did mount method is called after the component is rendered. This is where you run statements that requires that the component is already placed in the DOM. Example: at my first favorite color is red, but give me a second and it is yellow instead. At first my favorite color is red, but give me a second and it is yellow instead. Okay. Class header extends React.component constructor props super props this dot stat equals to favorite color colon red. Component did mount method set time out এটা হচ্ছে arrow function এখান থেকে this dot set state favorite color equals to yellow 1000 দিয়ে বোঝায় millisecond. Render method return h1 equals to my favorite color is this dot state dot favorite color h1 closed. Const root equals to react dom dot create root document dot get element by id root dot render header. Updating. The next phase in the lifecycle is when a component is updated. Component is updated whenever there is a change in the component's state or props. React has 5 built-in methods that gets called in this order when a component is updated. Get derived state from props method, should component update method, render method, get snapshot before update method, component did update method. The render method is required and will always be called. The others are optional and will be called if you define them. Get derived state from props. Also at updates, the get derived state from props method is called. This is the first method that is called when a component gets updated. This is still the natural place to set the state object based on the initial props. The example below has a button that changes the favorite color to blue, but since the get derived state from props method is called, which updates the state with the color from the fabcall attribute, and the favorite color is still rendered as yellow. Example: if the component gets updated, the get derived state from props method is called. Class header extends React.component constructor props super props this dot state equals to favorite color red static get derived state from props dot state return favorite color colon props dot fabcall. Change color arrow function this dot set state favorite color equals to blue render return div h1 my favorite color is this dot state dot favorite color. Button type button on click this dot change color আচ্ছা তো যার ফলে হবে কি চেঞ্জ কালারটা আমরা দেখি arrow function this dot set state favorite color equals to blue. Okay. const root equals to react dom dot create root. Const root equals to react dom dot create root of document dot get element by id root. Root dot render header fabcall equals to yellow. Should component update. In the should component update method, you can return a boolean value that specifies whether React should continue with the rendering or not. The default value is true. The example below shows what happens when the should component update method returns false. Stop the component from rendering at any update. Class header extends react.component constructor props super props this dot easter equals to favorite color red. Should component update method return false. Change color arrow function this dot set state camel case notification favorite color colon blue render returned div h1 my favorite color is this dot state dot favorite color h1 closed button type button on click this dot change color যেহেতু এটা অ্যারে ফাংশন এই জন্য এখানে প্যারেনথেসিস হয় নাই চেঞ্জ কালার বাটন ওকে div const root equals to react dom dot create root document dot get element by id root তারপর এটা আছে root dot render equals to header fine example same example as above but this time the should component update method returns true instead. Class header extends react.component constructor props super props this dot state favorite color equals to red. Should component update return for true. Change color array function this dot set state favorite color blue. Render return div h1 equals to my favorite color is this dot state dot favorite color h1 closed button type button on click this dot change color তারপর হচ্ছে চেঞ্জ কালার বাটন div const root equals to react dom dot create root document dot get element by id root তারপর হচ্ছে root dot render of header render the render method is of course called when a component gets updated. It has to re-render the HTML to the DOM with the new changes. The example below has a button that changes the favorite color to blue. Example: click the button to make a change in the component's state. Class header extends react.component constructor props super props this dot state equals to favorite color red change color array function this dot set state favorite color colon blue render method return div h1 my favorite color is this dot state dot favorite color h1 closed button type button on click this dot change color button closed div closed const root equals to react dom dot create root document dot get element by id root dot render header get snapshot before update. In the get snapshot before update method you have access to the properties and state before the update, meaning that even after the update you can check what the values were before the update. If the get snapshot before update method is present, you should always include component did update method, otherwise you will get an error. The example below might seem complicated, but all it does is this. When the component is mounting, it is rendered with the favorite color red. When the component has been mounted, a timer changes the state, and after 1 second, the favorite color becomes yellow. This action triggers the update phase, and since this component has a get snapshot before update method, this method is executed and writes a message to the empty div1 element. Then the component did update method is executed and writes a message in the empty div2 element. Example: use the get snapshot before update method to find out what the state object looked like before the update. Class header extends React.component constructor props super props this.state equals to favorite color red. Compound did mount method set timeout arrow function this.set state favorite color yellow আর এখানে কালি ব্র্যাকেটের পরে 1000 আছে মিলিসেকেন্ড get snapshot before update pre props prev state এই দুইটা আর্গুমেন্ট আছে document dot get element আর্গুমেন্ট নামগুলো প্যারামিটার get element by id div1 inner html dot before the update the favorite was prev state dot favorite color. Component did update method component dot get element by id div2 dot inner html equals to the updated favorite is plus this dot state dot favorite color. Render method return div h1 my favorite color is this dot state dot favorite color h1 closed div id div1 closed div id div2 div closed okay fine. Const root equals to react dom dot create root element document dot get element by id root dot render header component did update. The component did update method is called after the component is updated in the DOM. The example below might seem complicated, but all it does is this. When the component is mounting, it is rendered with the favorite color red. When the component has been mounted, a timer changes the state and the color becomes yellow. This action triggers the update phase, and since this component has a component did update method, the method is executed and writes a message in the empty div element. Okay. Example: the component did update method is called after the update has been rendered in the DOM. Class header extends React.component constructor props super props this dot state equals to favorite color red. Component did mount method set timeout function arrow function this dot set state favorite color colon yellow 1000 milliseconds. Component did update method document dot get element by id mydiv dot inner html equals to the updated favorite is plus this dot state dot favorite color. Render method return div equal return div h1 my favorite color is this dot state dot favorite color h1 closed div id equals to my div closed div closing div tag const root equals to react dom dot con create root document dot get element id of root dot render header. Unmounting. The next phase in the lifecycle is when a component is removed from the DOM, or unmounting as React likes to call it. React has only one built-in method that gets called when a component is unmounted. Component will unmount. Component will unmount. The component will unmount method is called when the component is about to be removed from the DOM. Example, click the button to delete the header. Class container extends react.component constructor props the super props this dot state equals to show true. Deal header array function this dot set state show false. Render method let my header if this dot state dot show যদি এখনো show করে my header equals to child. Return div my header button type button on click this dot del header delete header button. Div closed. Class child extends react component. Component will unmount method alert the component named header is about to be unmounted. Render method return h1 hello world h1 const root equals to react dom dot create root document dot get element by id root dot render of container. Okay, এই chapter this is the end of this tutorial episode 4. So I invite you to watch episode 5 of this tutorial React.js tutorial series. Thank you for watching this video. Have a great day.